The iPhone 14 Pro is finally here, and this is probably one of the biggest changes we've had to the iPhone since the iPhone 10 in terms of how you use it, and it is packed with a lot of new features, some hidden features, and just some general tips and tricks that if you picked up an iPhone 14 Pro, you're probably going to learn a lot about how to use it if you watch this video, and I think that all really does start with the new Dynamic Island. Alright, if you just got your iPhone 14 Pro, you probably already know the Dynamic Island does some pretty cool things with the user interface. So for example, if you want to go play some music and then you swipe up, you can see that it goes up into the Dynamic Island. You can see the album artwork and you can also see the now playing. But one thing you might have not known about the Dynamic Island is that you can actually long press into it to reveal more information. So if we long press on the music app, we can actually now see the scrubber for the music if you want to skip ahead. You can also skip between tracks for left and right, and then you can play and pause, and then you can also see the visualizer up here, or you can go over into here and then also activate your AirPlay settings. And I'll show you as you're listening to music, you can even scrub through it. So you do get kind of like full music control in the Dynamic Island itself, which I've been kind of describing almost like multitasking on the iPhone. It's not true multitasking. It's not you can split screen the music app right next to another app. But yeah, this is kind of like having a multi-window approach to iPhone, and you can access this from anywhere. So even if I go into Twitter and I long press on the Dynamic Island, again, my music controls are going to pop up. So there you go, you can actually surface more controls in the Dynamic Island by long pressing it. But that's not all. You can also have multiple apps running in the Dynamic Island at the same time. So let's run that example again. Let's go ahead and play our music. Let's swipe that up. That's going to go in the Dynamic Island. Let's go ahead and activate our timer again. We'll hit start on that 2-minute timer, swipe up, and then look at that. You can actually see that the music is here playing. You got the music over here, and then the timer over here in its own separate little cutout area. And then the really cool thing is that you can really quickly switch between apps this way. So let's say I'm in Twitter again, and then, oh, hey, I want to go back to my timer. Just press on the timer. There you go. You can see the timer. And then, you know what? I want to go check out my music again. Press over here on the music icon, and that's going to switch back to your music. And then again, as you do this, you can actually see that the timer gets a full view. You can go back into the timer. You can swipe up and go to your home screen, and then you're going to see both apps again. And that is just really cool. The fact that you can use multiple applications in the Dynamic Island kind of gives you a faster way to switch between apps. It's almost like a power user tool. And I've been really enjoying this feature. And look, you can even long press again on the timer, surface those controls again, and then you can long press over here on the music and surface those controls again. This is all very powerful stuff, a lot of different use cases for the Dynamic Island. It's not just a cool visual effect. There are actual practical benefits to this new feature. Another cool feature with the iPhone 14 Pro is, of course, it's always on display. As you can see, my iPhone 14 Pro's always on display is on. If I tap on here, you can see that it wakes up a little bit, gets a little bit brighter. But yeah, if you just press the sleep button, it's going to activate that always on display mode. Now, there's also a couple different cool tricks with this always on display. It kind of isn't always on in a sense because it's very smart. So if you put the phone in your pocket, Apple is smart enough to actually disable the always on display. That's kind of hard to verify in video. I can't feed a camera into my pocket, but you'll just have to take my word for it. And then another really cool feature with the always on display, and this is more of like a hidden feature, is that if you also own an Apple Watch, if you walk away, like say you leave the room, Apple will track that movement with your Apple Watch, track the location between both devices, and turn off the always on display again. And you know what? Let's verify that. We got the camera rolling, the always on display is on. I'm gonna walk off set. We're gonna see if this actually works. I mean, I hope it worked. I have no way of verifying that. I'll have to check the footage later. But hey, I get it. Not all users like the idea of an always on display. Maybe you have sensitive information that you might want to put on the lock screen widgets, or maybe you just don't, maybe you're afraid that it's going to waste your battery, or I don't know, maybe you just don't like the look of it. Well, you can actually turn off the always on display, so that is helpful to know. But to turn off the always on display, all you have to do is go into settings, scroll down to display, tap on display. Then you'll scroll down and then you'll see a toggle for always on. Just tap that. And then when we turn off our phone screen, It's off, so you can turn off the always on display. Another hidden feature with the iPhone 14 Pro is actually its brightness level. So if you want the eye-searing max brightness of 2000 nits, you actually cannot turn auto brightness off. That's because Apple uses the ambient light sensors for the iPhone 14 Pro to enable that 2000 nits of max brightness, and you cannot toggle this manually. So if you want to have the full 2000 nits of max brightness in direct sunlight, again, you're not going to get this indoors, you need to turn auto brightness on. So to make sure that auto brightness is turned on in case you turned it off on your old phone, you're going to want to go into settings, then you're going to want to scroll down. Now, you're not going to scroll down to display and brightness. You would think it's there, but it's actually not. You're actually going to want to go into accessibility. Now, in accessibility, tap on display and text size, scroll all the way down, and there on the bottom, it feels like Apple kind of hid this so they don't want you to turn it off, you will find auto brightness. When you enable auto brightness, that is how you get that maximum 2000 nits of brightness in direct sunlight. I have personally tested this out, and yeah, it is really bright and it looks gorgeous outside. Okay, if you're in North America and you have a new iPhone 14 Pro, you probably noticed it does not have a physical SIM card slot anymore. And during the initial setup, you probably transferred to eSIM okay. Hopefully you did. But you might be wondering, what if I wanted to switch between an iPhone? What if I wanted to, maybe you didn't like the iPhone 14 Pro. You wanted to go back to your old iPhone 13 and return this, or, maybe you're just planning to switch between different phones every once in a while. I don't know, whatever you got to do, right? Well, you might be going, okay, how do I get my cellular data on the other phone? Well, I'm going to help you out with that. So to do this, you're going to want to go into settings on the phone where you want to transfer the SIM card to, and then you're going to scroll down to cellular. Then you are going to hit add eSIM. Then all you're going to do is tap on this button here. I have it a little blurred out so you don't see my phone number, but you just tap that, and then you can actually just transfer your number over to this phone. So actually, that's not that painful of a process. All right, obviously with the new iPhone, one of the things you're gonna be using a lot is the brand new camera, and the new camera on the 14 Pro is pretty good so far. But there are a couple annoyances that I have with the camera's default settings. So basically, what I'm talking about is this macro mode. So right now, if I go into the camera, let me grab this watch over here, and let's say I wanted to do a macro mode shot. Now, Apple thinks this is pretty user-friendly, and maybe it is, but when you go down, it is just automatically going to switch the lenses into macro mode. There's really no visual distinction that this is in macro mode, and it's actually using the ultra wide angle lens, which is kind of a problem if you're trying to take a close up photo where you're maybe trying to get like some depth of field and you really don't want macro mode to engage. So I actually like to toggle this manually, and thankfully there is a control to do that. So to do this, let's go to settings. Let's scroll down to camera, hit camera, and then go ahead and scroll all the way down, and right on the bottom here, you will see macro control. So when you toggle this on, now you're actually gonna get manual control on when you enter macro mode. So as you can see, as I put this close again to the watch, you can see that there's a little flower button that's highlighted in yellow here. That means macro mode is on. But maybe I don't want a macro mode shot of this. Maybe I'm trying to get up to here, and you can see the macro mode is still engaged. Maybe I just wanna take it with the regular 1x camera. We'll just tap that. And now you can actually just use the regular 1x camera. You don't have to enable macro mode. But if you did want to enable it again, all you have to do is just get close, tap that, and then it will enable macro mode. And if you leave that on, if you really like that auto setting anyway, you could just leave this on. As long as you go back down, it will enable, but for the times you don't want it, you just tap that, it goes off. Manual controls on an iPhone, kind of helpful once in a while, isn't it? So there's a lot of video modes on the new iPhone 14 Pro, and even though these aren't necessarily hidden, they were kind of difficult for me to find when I first started using the phone. So one of the new modes is the action mode. Let me show you how to find that. So you're gonna go to camera, obviously, and then you're gonna go record a video, right? There is no separate action mode here on this video. So you can see cinematic mode, slow-mo, time-lapse. Yeah, if you're trying to find that action video mode, it's just in the general video mode. And then you're gonna see this new option right on the top right here, and that is the action mode. So if you tap this, it's gonna crop in a little bit. It's gonna make it 2.8K instead of 4K footage, but it's gonna make your footage very, very stable. So that's how you enable action mode on the new iPhone 14 Pro. And also, if you wanna change the frame rate, you can actually just tap the frame rate up here, and then you can change it to 30 frames per second, or even 60 frames per second. And then of course I shoot in 24 frames per second, so I usually have it enabled like that. But yeah, very quick switching on the frame rates, even for the action mode feature. But also, when you do action mode, it is gonna defaultly switch to the ultra wide angle lens. I really like the main lens on this camera. It provides a lot more detail, lets in more light. So if you're switching to action mode, you might just wanna tap the 1x real quick too, so you don't use the ultra wide angle lens. Speaking of video modes on the new iPhone 14 Pro, Apple also upgraded their cinematic mode to 4K. Last year on the iPhone 13 Pro, it was only in 1080p. So when you first open up cinematic mode, you're actually gonna notice that it still defaults to HD. Now, of course, you can go over and hit this over here and then change it to 4K. And you'll also notice that it's 30 frames per second, but Apple said that you can now do 24 frames per second. So if you wanna change that, just tap that again, and then again, it will change the frame rate to 24 frames per second. However, you probably don't want to do that every single time you go to shoot cinematic mode. Like if you want to shoot 4K video all the time, you want that setting always enabled, right? Well, there is a way to do this. So to do this, let's go to settings. Let's scroll down until we find camera again. Hit camera. And then you're gonna see a lot of options up here, but what we're looking for is cinematic mode. So hit record cinematic, and then you'll see you have all these default options that you can pick. So again, if you always open up the camera app without going in here, it's gonna default to 1080p at 30 frames per second. We don't want that. So pick 4K and select whatever frame rate you want. I want 4K at 24 frames per second because that is literally what most movies are shot at. So why not pick that? And yeah, now every time I go into the camera app and I go to cinematic mode, you can see right there that it will defaultly pick 4K 24 frames per second. And then if you want to change it again, you can just quickly tap it over here. So it's not like a big deal if you're like, oh, maybe you want it 1080 footage instead that time. You should probably just default to 4K though. Okay, you've probably heard that the iPhone 14 Pro has a new 48 megapixel camera system. And this is technically true, right? But by default, if you just go into the Photos app and start taking a photo, it's actually going to pixel bin that photo, and it's actually gonna bring it down to a 12 megapixel photo. Now, in theory, it's collecting a lot of the data from a 48 megapixel photo to make that 12 megapixel photo better, but one of the advantages of having a really high megapixel photo is that you can crop in for a lot more detail. Well, you know, maybe you want to use that full 48 megapixel sensor. How do you do that, Greg? Is there a way to do that? Yes, there is. And thankfully, it's pretty easy. So as we go into our photo app, you'll see that, you know, when you go to take a standard photo, it's going to take that 12 megapixel photo. But if you want to take that full 48 megapixel photo, all you have to do is tap this thing up here, which is the RAW. And then every time we take a picture, that is actually going to give us a 48 megapixel photo. So I'll take one in RAW. Let's go back and take a standard one. It's a boring desk photo. I know it's pretty boring, but let's swipe up on the details over here. And look, you can see that this is describing it as a 12 megapixel photo that is 1.3 megabytes. And then if we swipe over to this one, you can see that it's a 48 megapixel photo, but just be wary of that size, right? It is 47.2 megabytes per photo for the full sensor readout. So you might not want to do that all the time, but for certain shots where you want a lot of detail, you want to edit it later on your own, you might want to turn on that Pro RAW format. All right, but that is it for this video. Those are all of my iPhone 14 Pro hidden features and tips and tricks. I really hope you found this video helpful. I think the last iOS 16 video we did, it did really well, and a lot of people were very positive in the comments. They said it really helped them out. So please let me know if this video helped you out. Let me know what your favorite hidden feature was. And also, hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to give me a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel and get this cool wallpaper that you saw in this video, I'm actually selling this in a wallpaper pack. There will be a link in the description, so you can check that out as well. It's $5. You help support the channel. You help support me. It's all good. It's all good, right? We help support each other. If you learn something new, consider it a tip for me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.